Tonight's class, as always, is Le'iloi Nishmas Yitzchak Tzvi Ben Yosef. His Neshama should have an elevation. I also want to dedicate it to a young boy that just I found out this afternoon passed away this afternoon. The tragedy, Shalom Ben Menachem, young boy that just passed away a few hours ago. Okay. Here in South Florida. Not in Coral Springs, but in Chabad Boy in South Florida. Whatever, let's not get distracted with sad news. This is a distraction. I'll tell you after. I'm not telling you anything. I'm saying we should learn the Ilay Nishmas, the soul. Okay. Anyway, so today we're going to be talking about Billam, the most spiritual, unholy person you can meet. Yes. That's what Billam is. The most spiritual, unholy, or most spiritual, selfish person you can meet. He is worse than Korach. In different ways. They have their own kind of evil. Korach is what Korach was last class. We're going to discover Billam. Billam is quite a character of his own. Korach was also spiritual, but different. Before I get to Billam, just as an aside, but it's just interesting, I read today that actually there's archaeological proof for the existence of Billam from a wall plaster, meaning hieroglyph written on the wall of a cave that was found, dated from the late 9th century BCE in the temple in Deir Allah, which is in Jordan. And there it describes the night vision of a seer, Billam. And the name that's on the plaster in whatever language is written is Billam ben Ba'ar. So the same name that we have in the Torah is there's an archaeological find that actually has the same name of a person, of a prophet with night visions of God. So not that we need archaeological proof, but just interesting, yes. No, but this is a place called the Deir Allah. It's a place. Somewhere in Jordan. Okay. But besides for the fascinating life story that I'm going to share with you tonight, which is going to be quite interesting, we also, more importantly, need to see how can such a wicked person actually teach us something. So what we're going to discover tonight is a very, very powerful life lesson that I think to a certain extent we're all guilty of. We're all guilty of this character flaw that Billam possesses and we need to work on in our own life. And so before I tell you any of the story of Billam, I'm going to tell you right away the punchline. Okay? And by telling you the punchline first, there's a copy for you. Yes, thank you. And by the way, good evening, everyone else that's watching. Good evening, Shira and everyone else, Sherry. Before I tell you the story, I'm going to tell you the punchline. And then during the story, you'll be able to see it somewhere between the lines, and we'll get back to it at the end of the class, at the end of the discussion. The punchline, which is also the title of the lesson, is that Billam is a man that was very spiritual. He's a man that knows God, who talks to God, who understands God. But the question that we're going to end tonight's discussion with is, did Billam believe in God? You're giving me a look. If he talks to God, you would think, well, then obviously if you talk to the guy, then for sure you believe in the guy. Do you ever talk to someone and not believe in them and not trust them, or don't get the trust, and you talk to them, but you don't believe they told you something, and as they say it to you, you're like, yeah, sure. They don't mean a word of what they said. Yes, you know the person said it, you know, but it has no impact on the way you feel. You can know something very well, and yet it has no impact on you. To give a very, very simplistic example, you can understand very well why smoking is bad for you. Or you can understand very well why this kind of food is bad for you. And yet, you eat it. Because what you know has no impact on what you feel, and therefore there's no impact on what you do. So Billam knew a lot. Billam was a very smart man, a very spiritual man. But Billam didn't believe. That's the punchline. I gave you the punchline. Now let's get to the fascinating story. And then we'll get back to that punchline. After you see the story, you'll be able to appreciate what I'm saying far more clearly, but I want you to be able to see it as we go through the story. Let's start from the beginning. Who is Billam? Who is Billam? So Billam is actually, good evening, Faith. Billam is a descendant of Lavan. We all heard of Lavan, right? Lavan is the father-in-law of Yaakov, of Jacob. Now, when Yaakov first came to Lavan's house, Lavan only had daughters. He had no sons. That's why Rachel, the daughter, is out with the sheep. And later on, 14 years later, when Yaakov is being chased by Lavan, he has sons with him that were born in the merit of Yaakov's presence. Those sons are the grandfather or whatever, the great-grandfather of Billam. So Billam actually owes his very existence to the blessing of Yaakov. That's just the start. That's his family background.
So Billam was a son of Laban?
Not a son, he's a descendant, a grandson, I'm not sure, I don't know the exact lineage, but he's a descendant of the family of Lavan. So you have Moshe and the Jewish people who are descendants of Yaakov, and you have Billam who comes from the family of Lavan. In fact, Billam comes from Pesor, which is the same place as Padan. Lavan lived in Padan in Araim, and that's where Billam is, up in the north, more or less the same area. Now, Billam is also considered the greatest prophet of the non-Jews. In many ways, he's actually compared to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses. Meaning, we have a very fundamental principle in Judaism, which is that God made the world with a perfect equilibrium, a perfect balance of good and bad. We know it's a rule of Judaism. This opposite, this is how God made the universe. Meaning, the world, if it has holiness, must have a counterbalance in the realm of unholiness. If evil has a certain power, then holiness also has to have that power. So if there's Moses, I'll repeat it. If there's Moses, if the Jews have power of prophecy, a power of divine communication with God, then the forces of unholiness, the non-Jews also, not to say the exact same thing, but the forces of unholiness also need to have a divine communication with God.
You said this?
Opposite this is God made it. It's a verse. I don't remember where the verse is offhand. It's a verse. This opposite this, Asa Elokim, God made it.
I say that about everything.
Well, the first example of that is Jacob and Esau, right? But it's the whole world is like that, and
It's like opposite, right?
it's a counterbalance. It's a counterbalance.
I always say this: the internet, it could be so good, it could be so bad.
Correct. And the more power for good something has, the more powerful evil it has. So the more holy a person is, the greater his desires and his struggles are. The more good you can do, the more good you can do with money, the more evil, etc., etc., etc. Okay? I mean, that's not the point of the class, but so basically, when God gave the Jews Moshe, God gave the non-Jews Billam. And there's many comparisons between them. There's also differences. What? Yes. And there's differences. Billam only communicated with God at night. Moshe spoke to God face to face during the day. Moshe could initiate conversations. Billam could not initiate them. There's many differences. God spoke to Moshe by Yikra in the way of love. God spoke to Billam in the way of like happenstance, by Yikar. They happened to meet in public, so they happened to talk. But generally speaking, Billam is considered the great, just like Moshe is the greatest prophet of the Jews, the greatest prophet, the greatest man with unholy power in the world of Jew haters of unholiness is Billam. He's also blind in one eye. Yeah, he's not Jewish. Not only is he not Jewish, he's a hater. He's an anti-Semite who, I'll tell you later, was so excited when he was given the opportunity to curse the Jews, he couldn't sleep all night. When Balak sent messengers to Billam, come curse the Jews for me, he was so excited at the opportunity to go curse the Jews, he couldn't sleep all night. He was a pure anti-Semite. Anti-Semite epitomized by Billam. He had nothing to do with the Jewish people. He lived 400 miles north of where the Jews were camped. And he was begging God, please let me go curse the Jews. I would love the opportunity to curse them, to destroy them. I'm going to tell you soon there's bad blood between Billam and Moshe. But Billam is a non-Jew, but he's a spiritual person. He's given tremendous godly gifts, tremendous divine power, which he uses for all unholy things. Okay. He's also blind. Imagine like a real like spooky looking spiritual kind of guy, like who do magic and black magic. So he's blind in one eye. He's lame in one leg. He looks the part. I'm saying, like, he's a scary looking guy. That's all from the Torah. I didn't make that up. He's blind in one eye, lame in one leg. In fact, I read a fascinating medrash today. It's a little rated R, but that's from Marsha here. So the medrash says, Tziyal Kushemaini says if he's missing an eye, missing a leg, he did magic with his reproductive organ. Very talented kind of guy. Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. We'll get to that now. Billam is a very selfish, evil person. In Pirkei Avos, it describes the disciples of Billam as having an evil eye, a haughty spirit, and a desiring soul. A nefesh rechava means a soul that's never satisfied. A soul that's there's nothing that can ever satisfy the desires and the wants and the whims and the impulses of this kind of person. In fact, as Vivi correctly said, this is more well known, Billam had an ongoing relationship with his donkey. The donkey he rode, the donkey that started speaking to him, is the donkey that it says that he rode upon, and haskin, iskanti, I know the words that prove it are not relevant. But when the donkey opens his mouth and starts publicly embarrassing Billam in front of the other ministers that were riding behind Billam, and he said, am I not the only donkey you've ever ridden? Because Billam pretended like he had a horse. Well, we'll go back a second. The ministers say to Billam, where's your horse? An important guy should have a horse. He's riding a donkey. He said, my horse is out to pasture. So he says, the donkey says to Billam publicly in front of the other ministers, am I not the only donkey you've ever owned? The only one you've ever... So he said, yeah, but I used you for carrying packages. She said, the donkey you rode upon. The donkey you slept with at night. And Billam, what's Billam going to say? The donkey is talking to you. There's an angel standing over there. You're kind of busted. You know what I'm saying? Can't really argue with a talking donkey. Once the donkey talks, there's no more secrets anymore. Everything that happened in that bedroom between Billam and the donkey is being exposed. Yeah, wow was right, huh? Yeah, wow was right. So we're talking about a very spiritual person over here. He's a prophet. He does magic. Oh, but he's also busy engaging in a relationship with his donkey that kept him, I guess, happily occupied. Yeah, all this is okay. Anyway. So how does Billam describe himself? When Billam wants to describe himself, later on, we're going to get to the end of the story, Billam finally comes to the Jewish people. He tries to curse them 3 times. Instead of curses, blessings come out. And after all of that, when Balak, the king, says, get out of here before I kill you, Billam, you know some people, once you get in the microphone, they don't stop, right? They don't ever finish a speech. So Billam keeps on going. He keeps on going, and he starts to give the greatest prophecies about the end of days, about the coming of Mashiach, start flowing from the lips of Billam. How does this prophecy begin? So I'm going to share my screen so you can see the text. You have it in front of you, text number 1. The very first text is, let's use this to close 1 second. The very first text number 1. Oh, oopsies, here we go. Okay, share my screen. And you can see text number 1. This is verse number 3 from chapter 24, towards the end of the parsha. He took up his parable and said, the word of Billam, the son of Beor, and the word of man with an open eye. Okay, he has one eye. Notice, not open eyes singular, he's only one eye. The word of the one who hears God's sayings, who sees the vision of the Almighty, fallen yet with open eyes. So here is how he describes himself. And he's self-describing accurately. He's a man who hears the word of God, who sees a vision. He's Yedei Das El, is another verse actually. He knows, he sees God, he knows God, his eyes are open, fallen with open eyes. Okay? This verse is going to be the epitome of describing who Billam is. And again, I want you to know the punchline in advance, because I want to, when we go through the story, with this in mind, you can see the whole story differently. Meaning, instead of telling you the story and trying to rewind and show you this perspective, I want you to see it as we talk about the story. You're going to see it now. This is Billam as he self-describes. He sees God, but he's fallen. He sees God, but he's fallen. How is that? That's an excellent question. How could you see God and fall? Because what you see remains detached from, we're going to get to it at the end of the lesson. It doesn't believe. He knows, but as Tanya talks a lot about das, about the ability to connect your brain with your heart, he didn't know how to connect his brain with his heart. Very similar to Paro, by the way. Paro also was, we talked about the neck, the separated, the head and the heart. So Billam is a person. He sees, he hears God. He sees. In another verse, he says he's Yudea das Elyon. He knows the mind of God. And yet, despite all of that, he has no way of believing in God, of actually living what he knows. Okay. Now let's start the story. First, another cup of tea. The story actually does not begin in this week's parsha. There's bad blood between Moshe and Billam. Remember when Moshe was a little boy? It's a very famous story. And one time he grabs a crown off of Pharaoh's head. And the ministers of Pharaoh say, "Oh, look at this little boy. He wants to take over your kingdom. Kill him." Because the little kid grabbed the crown. You're going to kill him? Who was the advisor of Pharaoh who says, "Kill this little boy"? It was Billam. If you remember, I told you many weeks ago, we talked about Yisro. We had a class on Yisro, remember? And then I told you that there were three advisors to Pharaoh. Billam, Yisro, and who remembers the third? One day we'll do a class on him. He's an interesting character. His name is Job, Eov. Job, the famous guy who suffered tremendous suffering, Eov. Job in English. And when Pharaoh wanted to know what to do with the Jews, Billam said, throw the babies into the Nile. Yisro said, they're innocent, don't kill them. And Job kept quiet. And therefore, Billam was rewarded. Yisro had to run away. Pharaoh wanted to kill him. He had to go to Midian. And Job, that was quiet, ended up suffering later on in his life. So Billam is already a Jew hater from when he's an advisor of King Pharaoh. He's the one that wanted to kill the Jews. And he is the one that when Moshe is a little boy and takes the crown, he knows this is the boy that's going to fight against the kingdom of Pharaoh. He tries to have him killed. So guess what happens later on? Batya's son, meaning Moshe, we're talking about Batya also, one day wants to get back at Billam. And Billam is forced to leave the country because of Batya's son, meaning Moshe. Are you ready for something even more fascinating? Where does Billam go? The story I'm going to tell you, I told you also once before, but from a different perspective. When we talked about Moshe, we talked about this story. Billam leaves Egypt and they end up in the land of Cush. Now, the land of Cush, the land of Cush had a king called King Kunkunus, and he left Billam in charge of the country while he went out to go fight a war. And when he went out, this sounds familiar? He went out to go fight a war, and while he was fighting a war, Billam conspired with the local inhabitants into the capital city to get rid of the old king, Kunkunus, and to make Billam the new king instead. And then when the king comes back with his army, the gates are closed, the city is fortified, there's a big moat that they built all around the city, and the king can't get back into his own capital, to his own palace. And for 9 years, the king and his army are waging war against their own city, trying to get back into their capital, but Billam had taken over and wouldn't let them in. Until, they remembers what happened, Moshe came along. Moshe also had to run away from Egypt, because Dathan and Aviram had told Pharaoh that Moshe had killed the Egyptian taskmaster. So when Moshe, same highway, right? Same, I don't know the geography so well, but he ended up in the same place. And Moshe becomes friend with this exiled King Kunkunus that can't get into his own city. And Moshe is the one that gives the advice to the king to bring the storks and to starve them and then to bring them to the ditch where the poisonous snakes were. And Moshe is the one that gives the advice to the king how to reclaim his own city. And when the king and his army are able to get past the moat and the poisonous snakes and to get back into the city, Billam and his two sons run away. They use magic and they escape the city. And so Billam and Moshe have a long history. Okay. Fascinating how it's like the same, intertwined characters. I always reconnect. Fascinating stuff. Fascinating. So now, at the point of this week's Torah reading, the Jews are at the east side of the Jordan River. They've conquered the lands of the Amorim and the lands of Bashan, the king of Sichon, the king of Og, and the people of Moab are afraid. I don't want to talk about Moab today. It was this morning after davening, we talked about it. The king, a new king, his name is Balak. Maybe next we'll do a class on Balak. Balak uses his power to become the king. He scares the people of Moab into thinking the Jews are going to attack them, even though really they're not going to attack them. And Balak asks the Midianite, what should I do about Moshe? Moshe had grown up in Midian. That's where he got married, right? Zipporah was a Midianite girl. So Balak, the new king of Moab, asks the people from the land of Midian, where Moshe had lived for many, many years, tell me about Moshe. What's his secret? What's the way to get it? What's his secret? What do they tell him? What's the secret of Moshe? His ability to talk to God. His ability to talk to God, his power with words, with prayer. So Balak says, the way I'm going to get Moshe and the Jewish people is not with a sword, with an army, but I'm going to use the power of words, the power of not prayer, but the power of curses to overcome his power of prayer to destroy him. So Balak sends a delegation to the most famous, the most world-renowned, the most talented sorcerer, curser, black magic person there was, Billam. Now, by the way, something else interesting. Balak happened to know firsthand that Billam was good at what he did. How did Balak know that? Because years before, Billam had prophesied to Balak that he would one day become a king. He had blessed Balak that he'll be a king. So Balak says, I know that whoever you bless is blessed, whoever you curse will be cursed, because you blessed me to become a king. And even though he wasn't even a Moabite, he became the king of the Moabites. Okay. So a delegation arrives with money, with magical tools, and they come 400 miles north. They come to Pesor, where Billam lives, and they come to Billam and they say, Balak wants you to come with us to go and curse the Jewish people. As I mentioned, Billam is so excited, he can't go to sleep. But let's read now together. Let's read exactly what happens. What's the story here? Let's see exactly how the dialogue goes down, okay? So we're going to read now text number 2, which is chapter 22, verses 8 through 13. He says to them, so Billam says to these messengers, lodge here for the night, and I will give you an answer when the Lord speaks to me. So the Moabite nobles stay with Billam, meaning he's saying clearly, I can't do anything without God's permission. So stay here overnight. During the night, God will appear to me in a dream, and I'll let you know what he says. That night, verse 9, God came to Billam and said, who are these men with you? Now, God deliberately asks a very vague question. Does God not know who is with Billam? Does God not know?
No.
Of course he knows. So why does God say, who are these men with you? You want to see what he would say? Okay. Where else in history, I know Robert knows the answer, so it's aside to Robert. Where else in history does God come to a person that is doing a sin and come with a very, very vague, easy question? Adam. In the Garden of Eden, after Adam and Eve ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, God comes to them and what does he ask them? Doesn't say, why did you eat from the fruit? He says, Ayaka, where are you? Why does he ask such an easy question? Well, simply, he wanted to start a dialogue. When you want to have a dialogue with someone that did something wrong, if you're going to immediately attack them, you're going to immediately put up their defense system, right? That's natural. You attack me, I get ready for. So that's not going to work. So God says, how are you? How was your trip? Where are you? Not because God couldn't see where Adam was, and so not because God couldn't see where Billam is or who was with Billam. God knew who they were. He's starting a conversation, giving Billam the opportunity to speak to God properly. Now, the next step is when God says to Adam, where are you? And when God says to Billam, who are these men? God is really putting the ball in Adam's court. And so too, God is here putting the ball in Billam's court. God gave Adam the opportunity to say, I'm sorry. I sinned. I ate the fruit I shouldn't have eaten. Now, Adam didn't take that opportunity. Instead, he started, giving excuses. But this is the way God operates. God doesn't force anything upon us. God puts the ball in our court. God deliberately hides himself. Or in this case, God deliberately conceals his greatness and his wisdom and his knowledge in order to put the ball in our court, to allow us to make the decision of our own free volition, of our own free will, to decide, how am I going to react? How am I going to behave? So when God says to Billam, who are these men with you? God is deliberately hiding himself to give Billam the opportunity to choose how to answer, how to ask God for permission to go with these men. But Billam does not answer with humility. Instead, Billam gets confused by God's concealment, and Billam begins to convince himself, God doesn't know everything. If God is asking me, who are these men? It must mean that God doesn't know. Now, is that the way a person who believes in God would talk, or the way a person who knows God talks? He sees God, he talks to God, but he has no belief in God's greatness and God's power and God's knowledge. So if God says, who are these men? He takes it for granted that God's not smart enough or omnipotent enough or knowledgeable enough to know who are these men. Who? Billam is not intimidated. No, he's not intimidated. He responds with Billam to verse number 10. Let's continue. Verse number 10, Billam says to God with a haughtiness. The commentators say that Billam was very excited and very proud of himself. He says, Balak, the son of Tzipor, the king of Moab, sent me these men. They're not just regular men. These are messengers of the king. Behold, the people coming out of Egypt. A nation has covered the eye of the earth. That's another discussion about the eye, but not for right now. Come and curse them for me. Perhaps I'll be able to fight against them and drive them out. Now, can you imagine saying to God, not your nation that you took out of Egypt is covering the earth, a nation, some random nation, it's like a New York Times article here, right? Like something like, the way we were phrasing the words. A nation has covered the eye of the earth, so I want to go curse them. Right? Yeah? Are those the words of a person that knows who God is, or a person who believes that this is God's people? So God says to Billam, verse 12, you shall not go with them. You shall not curse the people because they are blessed. There's three things in this verse. First, it says you can't go with them. Sorry, Billam, you can't go. So Billam argues with God. He says, okay, I won't go with them. Let me curse them over here. I can curse them from right here in my own house. I'll still get paid, and I won't have to travel, right? So God says that you can't curse them even here. So then he says, okay, let me go with them, and I'll bless them. So I still get paid. Even though I give them a blessing. So then they don't need your blessings. Not your sting, not your kiss. Nothing. You stay out of it. They're my people. I got it under control. Don't get involved. Okay? So when Billam arose in the morning, he says to Balak's nobles, return to your country, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. How do you understand that's response of Billam? Return to your country, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. Verse 13. Billam responds, he wakes up in the morning, he comes to the messengers of Balak, and he says again, return to your country, for the Lord has refused to let me go with you. How do you understand that? It's God's fault that he can't go, not his fault. Okay. He's giving an excuse. He's blaming it on God. That's one way.
Most of the people do. They blame the problem on God.
They blame their problems on God. Okay. Very good. Yeah.
No, he's asking for money to be paid.
He wants more money. He wants more money here. Okay.
But he's also saying that he has no free will. He would go where God's refusing me to go, so he's implying that Hashem is taking away his free will to go with them.
He's implying that God took away his free will.
Right.
So you see it as him saying, but let's see if you're on Facebook. What do you say? Robert says in the verse 13, he's saying that God has taken away my free will. And Dvorah is saying that he's just hinting to them, you guys are not paying me enough. Kayla said, like Robert, he's blaming it on God. Not taking away my free will. You're saying he's blaming it on God. So really want to go, but he's blaming it on God. What do you say? The side of the room? Eric, Marsha, what do you say? Look at Marsha. Huh? You're not sure.
You see, if I read this at face value, it makes me think, well, he believes in God because God said don't do it, so he's not.
Right. So if you read at face value, what does Billam profess? What does Billam say? How does Billam talk? Like a religious Jew. God doesn't let me go. That's what Billam says. However, the Rashi tells us, how should we understand the words of Billam? What is Billam really saying? Let's look at the Rashi on that verse. Turn the page over to the Rashi. Says Rashi, this is simple interpretation of the verse. What does it mean I can't go with you? Stress the word I can't go with you. You're not important enough for me. But I could go with greater nobles than you. This shows that he was conceited and unwilling to reveal that he was under the control of the omnipresent, except in an arrogant manner. And because he implied that he really could go, it's just that God doesn't let me demean myself and diminish my dignity to go with such lowly messengers. How does Balak do? What does Balak do? He sends more important noblemen and more important ministers with obviously more money to try again. So Billam, although he says God didn't let me, you know what he's really saying? God would let me go, just not with you. Try again. Try again. Reminds me of the joke of this, you're not allowed to talk business on Shabbos. You're not allowed to talk business on Shabbos. So this guy comes to Shul Shabbos morning, and he says to the guy sitting next to him, Nish Ev Shabbos Kira. In Yiddish it means not to talk business on Shabbos. It's an expression. Nish Ev Shabbos Kira. Not to talk business on Shabbos. I'm trying to sell my car. 10 grand, I'm selling my car. So the guy says, after Shabbos, I'm interested. We'll talk after Shabbos. Anyway, by the Kiddush, later, after davening, by the Kiddush, the guy comes back to this first guy. So now I think, Nish Ev Shabbos Kira. Not to talk business on Shabbos. But I was thinking about what he's saying. I'm interested. I want to go see the car after Shabbos. I want to buy it. Nish Ev Shabbos Kira. I already sold it. Between the services and the Kiddush, he already sold it. He said, I believe in God, but, a little more money. Let's see what we can do. What happens? What happens next? You know what happens next? Balak sends more important noblemen. A more impressive, a more prestigious delegation comes to visit Billam. Again, asking him to come curse the Jews. And as Dvorah understands correctly, they obviously have a bigger suitcase with them for more cash inside. They didn't have credit cards back then. But, so they came with a bigger suitcase, a bigger diamonds, a bigger gold or whatever they came through. And if you believed in God, what would you say? If you believed in God and God told you can't do something and you believed in God, how would you react to say, I can't? It's against my beliefs. It's something to talk about. God wanted to curse the Jews. But if you could tell God to his face, there is a nation, not your nation, a nation that has covered the earth. And this is out of control. We better do something about this problem, this Jewish problem that's taking over the universe. And we better do something. And you can say that to God's face, which is what Billam did. Then, of course, you don't really believe. So he's saying, sure, guys, let me try again. He has chutzpah. And to him, God is not what God says is final. I just got to figure out a way to manipulate God into giving me what I want. See, I can believe in God or I can try and utilize God and use God for what I want. And so what happens? Again, he goes to sleep. Again, God appears to Billam. And God says, okay, you want to go? Go ahead. But I warn you now. You can only say what I tell you to say. The words I put in your mouth, those are the words you're going to say. Now, if you were smart, what would that mean to you? Don't go. If I'm only going to say what God tells me to say, this is not going to be too good, which is what ended up happening. But instead, you know what Billam thought in his mind? He thought, well, if God already changed his mind. Last week, whatever, when they first group came, he said, you can't go. And now God changed his mind. He said, I could go. So now he's saying you can't curse. I'll change his mind. I'll convince him. Right? But if someone like we try and okay, you do this and I'll convince you. Don't worry about it. I'm going to change your mind. So in Billam's corrupted, conceited, egotistical mind that's blinded by the money that these people are offering him and blinded by his hatred for the Jewish people, the fact that God said you can only bless the people, you can only give the words that I let you say and nothing else, I'll change God's mind. I'll figure out how to find the one moment of anger when God gets angry at the Jewish people. There's a moment in the day when God says, Rega ba'apa, a moment in God's anger. I'll find that moment and I'm going to get it. I'm going to use God's own instincts against God to get what I want, not what God wants. So thought Billam. What happens? You know what happens next? You get up in the morning and Billam saddles his donkey. Yeah, that donkey. I guess it was in his bed. Maybe that night wasn't his bedroom, I guess, because he had visitors. So the donkey was outside in the barn. There were people in the house that night. And he saddles up the donkey. They're off. And they're gone. And guess what happens? An angel of God comes and he blocks the road with an outstretched sword. And the donkey sees this donkey. The donkey sees this angel. And what does the donkey do? It moves out of the way. It goes out into the field. The first time he walks around into the field, and Billam takes his stick and whacks the donkey for going off the road. Now remember, there's people walking, the other ministers and noblemen are traveling behind Billam. And then they keep on going, and again the angel comes to block the way. But this time the road is more narrow. And so when the donkey tries to push to the side to walk past the angel, he rubs the leg of Billam against the wall, which is why Billam becomes lame. And Billam is very angry at the donkey for scratching or smushing or crushing his leg. And again, he takes his stick, he gives a zetz, he gives a bang, he whips the donkey. And then comes a third time. And this time the donkey is walking, and it's a very, very narrow road. There's no room to turn, not to the right, not to the left. And there, the angel is there. And what does the donkey do? It stops, parks. Donkey crouches down because the donkey can't go in front of the angel. And Billam, his anger flares up, and he starts beating the donkey. And he says, if I would only have a sword, where's my sword? I'm going to kill you. That moment, yeah, you have a question?
Does everybody else see the angel?
No. What the other people are seeing at this moment is a man that is coming to curse the Jews who can't even curse his own donkey and turn it into a frog, and he's looking for a sword to kill his donkey. Not very impressive. At that moment, God does a tremendous miracle. And the donkey opens up its mouth. And the donkey starts to talk. And maybe one day we should do a class of the donkey, huh? But I did just pop in my head. I don't know what we'll talk about the donkey, but the donkey starts to talk. And the donkey says to Billam, why are you hitting me? Have I ever once before not walked where you told me to go? Have I ever failed you before? Have I not been your loyal donkey for many, many years? I've been with you at day. I've been with you at night. I've been with you through everything. Wherever you travel, I'm the only donkey you've ever had. And all these people are listening to the conversation, you know. And then, after all that, God opens the eyes of Billam. Billam sees the angel. So the talking donkey is pretty cool, but I want to focus on the fact that he sees the angel now. And now he sees an angel with an outstretched sword blocking the path. And the angel says to Billam, you're lucky that your donkey stopped. Because if your donkey would have kept on going, I would have killed you and let your donkey live. Instead of you trying to kill the donkey for stopping.
And did the people hear this?
Yeah. Well, they definitely hear what Billam responds. So now imagine you're Billam. You're traveling, and there's an angel blocking you on the way. And your donkey that's never failed you before is talking to you and telling you, I can't go. There's an angel blocking the path. That's why I stopped. You think that will wake you up out of your self-obsessed desire for greed and for power and for hatred of the Jews? I say, maybe I should be careful now. Maybe this is not a well-fated trip. Maybe. And yeah, well. So what happens? Carol just asked an excellent question. I'm going to answer it in 2 minutes or 3 minutes. Why didn't God say no the second time? We're gonna get there soon. It gets worse. So let's go read the text. What happened? Let's go back to text number. Where we hold it? Text number 4. Let me open it up. And here's how Billam responds to the angel. Billam says to the angel of the Lord, I have sinned. Chatasi. I have sinned. Because I did not know that you were standing on the road before me. Now, if it displeases you, I will return. Hold on. Before we get to the Rashi, what was the sin of Billam? What does Billam say is his sin? That he's going against God and traveling to go curse the Jews? That he hit a donkey? I didn't know you were there. My sin is not that God told me not to go and I'm still going. My sin is not that I want to go curse God's chosen people. My sin is that I didn't see you to know that I shouldn't hit my donkey. Meaning, really, I should hit my donkey. I didn't see you. That's why I hit my donkey. That was my sin. I didn't see you. Now, if it displeases you, I will return. What does that mean? What is he offering over here? He's not really saying I will return. he's really making fun of the angel. How is he being disrespectful to the angel? And Rashi explains to us that this reply was a challenge against the omnipresent. He, meaning Billam, is saying to the angel that God himself commanded me to go, yet you, an angel, annul his words. This is his custom. He says one thing, and then he says an angel and retracts it. He said to Abraham, take now your son for the binding of Isaac, right? You know that story? Take your son and go slaughter him as an offering to me. And then, through an angel, he annulled his words, right? Who appeared to God, to Abraham on the actual mountaintop? The angel of God appeared to him and said, don't slaughter your son. So I too, if it displeases you, I will have to return. But he's making fun of God over here. God says one thing, and then sends an angel to say something else. So in his confession, he's already debating the validity of this angel in his way and how it doesn't make sense because God let me go, etc., etc. So, verse 35, the angel of the Lord said to Billam, go with these men. But, here's the but the word I will speak to you, that you shall speak. So Billam went with Balak's dignitaries. Okay. So he says, I sinned. Not that I'm going. I sinned because I didn't realize. If you force me to go back, I'll go back. But God said, you can go. Just say what I say to say. So the question is an obvious question that was already asked on Facebook by Carol, was asked this morning. And the question is a very, very simple question. It's not relevant to the point, but it's a very important question with a very powerful answer. What's the question? If God doesn't want them to go, then God should just stop them from going, right? So why is God not stopping? Why is God allowing the angel, God sent an angel to stop Bill. But then at the end of the day, the angel says to Billam, you can go. Why does the angel not tell Billam, go back home? Well, God had a different plan, okay.
They're using Billam to say what they want.
We're using Billam to get blessings. The greatest blessing the Jews will ever get is going to come through Billam, that's true.
You see what happens when you go against.
Okay, that's also true. When you go against God, you see what happens.
It's free will.
Free will. Yes, absolutely correct. Free will. Any other thoughts? One of the most beautiful statements in the entire Talmud, in my very non-humble opinion, is right here. Right here. The Talmud tells us, and Rashi quotes it. What is the reason why God would allow the angel to let Billam go? Which is the same question. Why would God the second time allow Billam to go? The first time he said no. Says the Talmud, and it's quoted here in Rashi, text number 5. Go with these men, says the Talmud in Makis, page 10 if I'm not mistaken. The path that a person wants to go, he's led along that path. When it is beautiful. When you commit yourself to a path, when you set your destiny, when you set your vision on something, God's not going to stop you. That's not free will. The entire premise of reward and punishment is that you have the choice to choose the path on which you will go. So God will give you warnings. God will send you messages. He'll send you little signals. And either you'll pay attention, or you'll be like a horse with blinders on. You know what blinders are? You can't see anything but where you're the horse. They put like straw in front on a little like stick, and you're going, and you can't see anything else. On the path that a person chooses to go, he's led there. He's a not God, not that God takes it. Like in the third tense, he's led that way. His own actions, his own desires, his own greed, his own jealousy, his own hatred, his own evil, his own selfishness, it drives him. It takes him to the path that he has already chosen for himself, despite the fact that God has clearly told you opposite. So therefore, God told Billam, don't go. You're still so desperate to go when they came again. You don't already know my answer. You don't believe in me, and yet you want to try again? Okay, try again. I'll let you get what you think you want. I'll let you, because that's the path you obviously want. God doesn't stop us from self-destruction. God does not have any in like an oven or some different machine. When it overheats a certain point, it just shuts down, right? The air conditioner has a thing. When it starts to leak, if there's like the water backs up in the water pan of the air conditioner, turn off thing. Human beings don't have that setting. You can be self-destructing, self-flooding, overheating. God says, "B'chavod, go ahead. If that's the choice, if that's the path you choose, I will allow you." I've told you already not to. So it's not like God doesn't guide us or God doesn't show us right from wrong. God shows us right from wrong. And that's what God says. If your portion is wisdom, you are destined to perish from the world. Meaning God says, you chose that path, I will allow you to go on that path. I will not stop you. And so therefore, Billam is told by God, don't go. And he goes, okay. He's told by God, don't. When he asks again, God says, fine, you can go. He starts going. God says, I'm going to be nice to Billam. I'm going to send an angel, not to stop him, because if God uses his angels to stop us from self-destructing, that's not free will anymore. So God said, I'm going to send an angel to teach him, to guide him, to educate him. But will this knower of God, this man with open eyes, see? Or will he fall? He's a man with open eyes, flat on his face. Right? There must be a good joke about that. I just don't know anything off the top of my head. But like I saw and I still fell, right? Oh, I thought of a good joke. I thought of a good joke. This guy, not if people are seven, there's a joke. I think you have to have a lot of, if you have enough in your back of your head somewhere. So these two guys are walking, and one of the guys walking, he stutters. So he stutters. So he said, "Oh, look. What? There's an airplane." Said, where? You missed it. By the time he said the airplane already flew by. Okay. And walking a little further. Said, quick, look. Said, what are we looking at? Said, over there. What? The bird. Bird? Which bird? You missed it. Okay. They're walking a little further. And he said, look. He says, I see it. So he says, if you saw it, why did you step in it? I had a good joke. Okay. Point is, Billam saw the angel. He saw the angel, and he still stepped in it. You understand? He saw the angel. He saw an angel. I don't understand what we're talking about here. He saw an angel. Did he have any doubt what the message of the angel was? You would think he would have no doubt. I mean, me and you have no doubt because we're objective viewers of the story. So it's easy for us to say, this is as black and white could be, right? It's a black and white cookie right here. Not Billam. Billam was so self-obsessed. He was so narcissistic. He was so driven for his desire to kill the Jewish people and to get the money, he could not see what the angel was telling him. So the angel is not there to control us. That's the answer to the question. The angels don't control us. God doesn't control us. God gives us two paths. And the path you choose is the path you get. So the angel comes, doesn't get the hint. 3 times. He says, I sinned. But you don't really want me to go back because then you'd be going against God, Mr. Angel, if you tell me to go back. So the angel's, okay, fine. That's what you think. Here's the path. Continue right along your merry old way. You understand? I sinned, but you're not really telling me that God said I could go. So you're not really telling me to go back, are you? Okay, go. What happens next? What happens next, my dear friends? He comes to the city of Billam, to Balak. Balak gives him a small little flimsy meal of like 1 goat and 1 sheep. So I'm going to teach this guy how to be generous. So Billam got defended. I came with only 1 sheep and 1 goat for the meal. I want tongue. I don't know what he wanted. Ribeye, grilled rib, smoked, I don't know what. So next he said, I'm going to teach this guy to be generous. They go the next morning to build an altar. He said, build 7 altars. 7 sheep and 7 goats on every altar. A sheep and goat on every altar. 14 animals. And Billam goes off to find a way to look for an evil for the Jews. The whole story, but we're running out of time. He comes back, he gives the first of 4 sets of blessings. First blessing about the history of the Jews, about our forefathers, about Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the rocks from which we come. And then he goes to a second place, and there again, he comes to curse the Jews, and instead, what comes out of his mouth? Blessings. I see no evil in Jacob, no iniquity in Israel. How could I curse the one that God doesn't hate? Well, God changed his mind, etc. And then a third time, they don't give up. You would think they would give up, right? You would think they would stop building altars and trying to curse the Jews, but they don't give up because the path you want to go is the path you go. When you're so obsessed in your own evil, you continue self-destructing. There's no shut-off valve. There's no automatic kill switch. He just keeps on going. They keep on going further and further. They go to a third place. And again, they build 7 altars with 14 animals. And again, he goes off to go find a way to curse the Jewish people. And again, he comes back with another set of blessings about their eternity, how God is with them and God loves them and they're the ones that God chose. How could anything bad happen to them, etc. Matovu ohalecha Yaakov. How beautiful are your tents, O Jacob. That's in the third set of blessings. Describing the greatness of the Jewish people, the privacy of the Jewish people. Mishkanesecha Yisrael, your dwelling places of Israel are beautiful. Describing the shuls and the yeshivas and the study halls of the Jewish people. Each blessing can be a whole discussion and class and beautiful things. And then even more, he talks about the end of days and Mashiach and the shooting star coming out of Jacob and the etc. And when Balak says to Billam, I didn't bother bringing the text here because we have the point already. When Balak says to Billam, what are you doing to me? I brought you to curse the Jews. Billam has no choice but to say, I told you. I could only say what God told me to say. I can't say anything else. And yet they go again to try again. You understand? You understand? I really don't. I'm thinking about it, like we should really even hear it. You can read it. He comes back the first time to cursing. He instead of cursing, blessings. And Balak says, and what are you doing? And Billam says, I have no choice. I have to say the word that God said. The second time when Billam doesn't want to go back to Balak anymore, God takes him with like a hook in his mouth. It says God put a davar, he put a word. But the word davar could also mean an object. He put like an object, like a hook into Bilam's mouth, took Billam back to Balak, and opened up Bilam's mouth, and out came all the blessings. 4 times. 3 times when he tries, and then the 4th time he already just continues on his own. All these blessings. Here's what I want to talk about. So let's go back to our question now. Did Billam believe in God? He didn't believe. No matter how much he knew, and as I said at the beginning of tonight's discussion, he knew God well. He was the most spiritually elevated, the most spiritual, most divinely aware of all non-Jews. He spoke to God. It wasn't some magic trick. He really was godly. I don't know if godly is the right word. He really was aware of God. And yet, it had no impact on his heart, had no impact on the way he felt. His heart was fully engrossed in selfish, lustful, evil, sinful, narcissistic behavior, living with a donkey, lusting after money. As I mentioned before, Pirkei Avos says the 3 character traits of Billam: have an evil eye, a haughty spirit, and an unsatiable spirit, a desire, a soul. He saw everything with an evil eye. He was ego, self. That was Billam. A man full of ego. The whole world was for him, about him. He couldn't say anything else. So in his heart, he didn't feel God at all. And therefore, his actions are not what he knows. His actions don't reflect what he knows at all. His actions reflect his heart, his desires, his impulses. That's his heart. That's his actions. Are we ever guilty of that? Are we ever guilty of, all of us in this room profess to believe in God? That's why we're here, right? And we all believe in God, and we all know God to some extent. And yet sometimes our heart feels and we act in ways that we know God doesn't want us to act. I'll give a very simple example, an easy example. Let's say, God forbid, a person has a medical issue. They get sick. What's the first response they do? They go to the doctor, and they work with the doctor, and they do this medicine. If you believe that health, every one of us will say health comes from God. And yet when we have a health issue, we don't put our first trust in God and start going to synagogue and doing an extra mitzvah, saying, what mitzvah could I do in order to get God's blessings? Instead, we worry about money. We worry about the doctor. You understand? I want to say a very, very personal example. I'm like debating till now. I'll just share it. My wife recently had a baby, Baruch Hashem, a healthy baby. And the doctors didn't want to have a baby in a natural way. They wanted to do a C-section and the whole, because she had other C-sections. And so for us, we each made a resolution. My wife and I each took a mitzvah upon ourselves, like a month before the baby was born. We each took a mitzvah, a very difficult mitzvah. I took one I'm not going to share. She took a mitzvah. I don't know if she'll let me share. She took a mitzvah. And I'll share hers, but I'll share what hers is. You know what her mitzvah was? Her mitzvah to allow me to do the Wednesday night class, the practical Judaism class, which she was hard for, to give me up another night of the week. She did it for the spiritual merit that she should have a healthy baby in a natural way. And she had a healthy baby in a natural way. Even though there's a chance of a risk and and the doctor didn't want to do it naturally. So if you just say, I know God, but you don't believe it in your heart. I talk to people all the time. I was recently in someone's house. They were diagnosed with cancer and they had a tumor. And I say, your mezuzahs are old. You should probably check your mezuzahs. Nah, don't worry about it. I promise you, not coach. I should really, if I was, I would go bring them a new mezuzah for free but I told them, I'll go bring you, check your mezuzah, change it. Yeah. If I was sick, God forbid, checking my mezuzahs, I have an issue in my back. I checked my mezuzahs in my house recently, at least in the rooms. When you're struggling with an issue, again, I don't want to share personal things. I'm struggling with a medical issue, and last week I gave a large amount of money to tzedakah to help me, specifically in the merit of a refuah shleim. If you believe in God, then when I have an issue, if I know that my health comes from God. I know that. I know. How do I feel? How do I feel? You know how many people, you can be religious. You can say Baruch Hashem 45 times a day, 100 times a day, right? And like Billam said, I can't do whatever God doesn't say. Stay overnight, let me see what God says. I can only say what God says. And yet, at the same time that Billam says, I can only say what God says, Billam tries to say things that knows God says you can't say. So how many people say, I know that God is watching. But how do we act? Do we feel, do we believe that God is watching us? I've said the story many, 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 many times of this Shpala Zayda, the rabbi that was traveling in a wagon. He was traveling in a wagon, and the wagon driver, got hungry. They were driving through an orchard, and on the other side of the fence is these big, beautiful apple trees, delicious apples. So the wagon driver says to the Shpala Zayda, I'm really hungry. We didn't bring lunch. Let me stop for a minute. This is some beautiful apples. I'm going to jump over the tree. You look out. If you see anyone watching, just tell me and I'll run. If no one's watching, I'll go get the apples. So the guy, parks the animal. He climbs over the fence. He's climbing up the tree. He's about to get to the top of the tree to get the apple. And the Shpala Zayda screams, someone's watching! Someone's watching! He jumps off the tree, jumps over the fence, starts whipping the horses. Now as they're flying down the road, he looks behind him. There's no one there. He says, you lied to me. There's nobody watching. And the Shpala Zayda says, God is watching. Right? Do any of us not believe that God is watching, that God sees our every action, that God sees everything we do? Every little kid knows that Hashem is here, Hashem is here, Hashem is truly everywhere. We all know that. But do we feel it? Do we believe it? Do we actually have an emotional awareness of the fact that God is watching us and that God controls our actions or not? To believe in God does not mean that I know that or believe that God created the universe 5,782 years ago or 10 billion years ago, whatever you want to say. That's not what it means to believe in God. To believe in God means to feel his presence in my life. That's what it means to believe in God. To believe in God means I feel God in my life, in the decision I make right now, what to do now, how to act, how to behave, how to react to this medical issue, to this crisis, to this person, to this nudnik, to this whatever. My decision how to react is based on what I feel. And if I believe in God, if I feel him in my life, if I feel his presence, if I believe in his omnipotence and his power, then my reaction will be totally different than if I only know God, but in my heart I believe in myself. Understand? Billam knew God, but he believed in himself. We have to believe in God. That's what it means. To believe that God is present in every single aspect of my life. In every aspect, in everything I do, wherever I am, God is there. And if you believe in God, then you have the strength to overcome anything. You have the strength to overcome anything. I want to end off with this. Today is Yud Beis Tammuz. Today is the birthday of the previous Rebbe. It's the day when he was freed from a death sentence in Soviet Russia. It's a whole long story. Now is not the time for all the details. Point is the day of celebration for Hasidim. If you were to encapsulate the entire story of the underground Judaism in Russia during communism under Stalin, led by the previous Rebbe and continued by our Rebbe until the fall of the Iron Curtain, the Hasidim in Russia, the Jews in Russia, did not know a lot about God. They were technically, Jewishly, very uneducated Jews. But they believed in God. They believed in God. They believed. And therefore, no matter what the stress was, what the challenge was, what the obstacle was, they believed that God was with them, and that kept them Jewish, and that kept them connected throughout thick and thin. And so this is the life lesson. This is the me in the Bible lesson for us from Billam. Billam was a genius. He knew a lot about God. He was very smart. But all he believed in was himself. And what we need to learn from Billam is not to be so smart, but to believe. Not to say God is in charge and then behave in a completely opposite manner. To believe what we say. To believe what we know. When we believe what we know, then we'll act the way we believe, and we'll act in synergy with what we know. Okay, my friends? Good night. Good night. God should bless each and every single one of you. For those of you who are watching, thank you for joining us. You can say good night. Those didn't say hello to in the before. Next week, B'ezrat Hashem, same time, same place.